instantly when we visited the house to see that if it were restored properly, and we way underestimated what that was going to entail or how long it took, but decided it would be worth it to do it, partly for preserving it as art for the future, but also mainly to be in a joyous place to live in ourselves with our son. And we found that to be true. My name's John Gillespie. We're here at the Kallis house by Rudolph Schindler, built in 1946. It's in the Hollywood Hills in Los Angeles, California. The house was built by Rudolph Schindler, who was a protege of Frank Lloyd Wright and did probably about 35 houses in the California, mostly Southern California area after he'd left Wright. Probably half of those are still existent today in some form. This house was extensively renovated, or restored really, in 2017 to 2022. Schindler often worked with people who were artists or musicians. It was a combination in this case. Mischa Kallis, the house was built for him. He was both a fine artist with oil paints, but also a production designer at Universal Studios, which is within sight of the house here. The house was built for him. This end of the house was done as a living quarters. What's now a dining room used to be an outdoor courtyard with trees growing through the floor. That got enclosed in the 60s. The far end of the house was his artist studio. A lot of windows, a lot of clerestory windows, a lot of light coming in for being able to paint there or to work on projects he was working on. They owned it until the early 50s when they sold it to Mr. Kallis's cousin, Jacqueline Charlin, who was a concert pianist. She had played at Carnegie Hall at one point in her career. Her husband was one of the most famous cantors in Los Angeles. So they had musical performances here. The space behind me had a grand piano. Famous violinists, Joshua Heifetz and others, had played here to audiences that would come regularly to hear concerts in the house. And the acoustics of it are amazing, in part because of the slant on the walls. It projects music very well. And we found that to be true when we've had some performances here ourselves. It was just the original owner, Mischa Kallis, and his wife, who sold it to his cousin, Mrs. Charlin, who lived here, brought up 2 daughters in the house. And she lived here until she died, which was, I guess, in 2016. So we're the 3rd owners of the house. It's a privilege to own it, but also kind of a stewardship responsibility to keep it up and let people come and see it and enjoy it themselves. This house came on the market in 2017. A number of people had almost bought it, but discovered it was going to cost a fair amount to fix up. The estate that had owned it loved the house, had done what they could, but there was a lot of deferred maintenance and deterioration, and things had changed in the house that weren't original. When it came on the market, we did a tour of it with Crosby Doe, who's a prominent modern architectural real estate agent in town, who we bought the original Schindler that we own from. He was representing this estate for this house. So we came and toured it. We're daunted by the just sheer number of things that needed to be worked on. But it was, even with the gray paint, the carpeting, everything else, you could tell how loved the house had been, and that it just needed work on it to bring out its charm. So we decided it was worth the trouble to go ahead and start doing that. And this is the result.
My name is Susan Orlean. We are here in one of the great works of Rudolph Schindler. He was doing something really different from Wright, although I think you can see quite obviously the connection between the two. When we saw this house, we could tell that it was a very special piece of architecture. But it was like a woman dressed in a very dowdy outfit. You sensed that she was beautiful, but it was hard to see beyond the sort of frowsy outfit she was in. There were beige carpets throughout the house. There was gray paint on all the walls. We had no idea what was beneath the gray walls. My first thought when we looked at the house was, we're gonna have to pick a better paint color because the gray was really dreary. Well, we had no idea that underneath that gray paint was beautiful wood. The way we found out was we saw a picture of Schindler visiting the house right after it was built. And when we examined the picture, we saw that all the walls were the natural wood, and they were different tones and different kinds of wood. But it suddenly occurred to us that these were never meant to be painted. They were beautiful walls of mahogany, of Douglas fir. The ceilings were this beautiful tongue and groove paneling, and it was really like an incredible striptease, removing this layer of gray paint, which was many months, picking up these drab beige carpets and putting down nice, simple hardwood floors. And it was as if we saw the house for the first time in an entirely new way. I'm glad that we were able to see beyond these layers that had kind of been applied to the architecture, that we could remove and find the house intact underneath. We came over here with no notion that this might be a house we would buy, none, zero. And walked in just out of curiosity, and we liked it, but because of all of these layers of paint and carpet, as we were looking at it though, we thought, oh, this definitely is more space, and there were certain things right away that we really liked. What's funny is that I remember looking at the fireplaces, and the fireplace in our previous Schindler was made out of orange brick that was very linear, laid very neatly, stacked and tidy. So we'd come into this house and there are these crazy, brutalist, like giant Flintstone boulders. And I think we both thought, wow, these are weird. And also the grape stakes on the outside of the house that looked very shaggy and again, sort of rough and ragged. We were very ambivalent and went back and forth until like literally the closing. I think we both thought, what have we done here exactly? And then it became this multi-year journey of the restoration, which we could never have anticipated. And there was a lot of fun and adventure in it. It shouldn't be portrayed as drudgery. Obviously, it's very expensive and it takes lots of time, but there's a lot of excitement as you begin seeing the paint removed, and you remove the kitchen that had been redone in the 60s and put back a replica of the kitchen from the 40s. Just felt like we kept seeing the house become more and more alive. One of the things I love about this house is it is a joyful house. It's not grim, it's not harsh, it's absolutely joyful. You feel elevated by being in it. I really think you feel Schindler's joy in designing it. There's a playfulness, a kind of winking that you sense from him throughout the house, things that are clearly meant to be delightful. But there's no question that he wanted you to experience the light moving throughout the day in the house. And we wake up in the morning with this a sweeping view of the mountains and the light coming in from the east. And then in the afternoon when I'm cooking dinner, there's the light coming in from the south, and it moves through the house all day long. And because of the angles of the house, it constantly feels like it's being reconfigured depending on where you're sitting, what angle you're taking as you look at it. It is a wonderful house to live in. There's a lot of privacy in it, but also a lot of shared space. And it's not a huge house, but you can experience it in all these different ways. So it fills me with delight every time I wake up in the morning, every time I come home and walk in and think, wow, this is beautiful. I got really interested in the history of preservation of architecture in LA because I think LA has a lot of great buildings that have been saved because of the new consciousness about the architectural history. Saving this house really makes me feel good because besides the cosmetic changes, it had issues like a foundation that was cracked and rotted wood and things that would have perhaps led to the house eventually falling apart or not being worth saving. So I'm really glad that we caught it at a moment where it was still manageable financially to save it. In the course of doing the necessary work, we kind of doubled down and really shored it up, really made the foundation sturdier than it had ever been, improved all of the things that should make the house last for another 100 years. These mid-century houses are very much part of what is distinctive about LA. This is where all of the architects in the sort of mid-century period came out here because there was land to build. There were patrons willing to gamble on an experimental looking house. They weren't just building Center Hall colonials in Connecticut. They could come out here and do something radical. That's part of the history of LA, and the consciousness about conserving those houses is part of the legacy of the city, and I'm really happy to be part of it.
The other thing that struck us as odd when we bought the house, but we've grown to love it as well, are called grape stakes. They're redwood, long stakes about that wide that were used in vineyards. And the entire back of the house is clad with it, and some parts of the front and the garage. The idea, apparently we've heard, was that Schindler wanted it to feel like it was part of the woods here with the trees. So it does actually do that. It sort of incorporates the house into the landscape. The exterior on the northern whole side of the house is completely grape stakes. And then it's used in different spots for accents elsewhere, and it's the whole front of the garage, which disguises the house from the street because the house is down the hill a little bit from the street. And so you get an enormous amount of privacy, surprisingly. And we're still able to grow hedges so that you have a private feel here. This house is a Los Angeles Cultural Historic Monument, which gives it a certain amount of status. You could theoretically get a Mills Act. The preservationist feeling in Los Angeles is great. We've contributed to it a little bit monetarily, but also, I think, in restoring this house in particular and opening it up to visitors. We've had quite a few architectural students and professors and board members of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation and others come visit. So we like to share the whole experience of being in the house with other folks. And it's been fulfilling from that side as well. Just to see the light and how it plays with the house. You kind of interact with it in an emotional way. To see architecture that's this brilliant, but also emotional and beautiful, and see that it pulls together so well has been a joyful experience.